first things first, what do you remember from last week? Remember anything about our kind of rules for clean data, good data quality?
Yes. I remember the phrase, the top row, and sort of having those be like the categories of them. Maybe like the person's name and the date and the time.
Yeah, great. Freezing the top row is a great way to make the sheet more readable. Yeah, great.
I was gonna say that that each row and column, like you attribute each row and column. Not in my notes are confusing, but individuals and rows each attribute in its own column.
Yes, perfect. You got it. Individuals and rows, attributes and columns. So the data that we're going to have today is like we've already done all the steps from last week. So we've already done kind of the cleaning. So we're going to be working with a bit of a cleaner data set today so that we can focus more on the formulas. But both of those things are good rules to remember. So when we're looking at our data, we know each thing is going to be in its own row. Every piece of information about it will be in a column. And then freezing our top row. Great, especially for bigger data sets, makes it a lot easier to navigate. Cool. All right. So these are our kind of main things we're going to learn today. So we did most of the organizing and data stuff last week, but I'm going to show you a little bit more stuff about how to kind of clean up and format your cells and your numbers and all of that. Most importantly, we're going to talk about how to set up a formula, configure various formula options, use combinations of formulas we'll get into a little bit at the end. And we're also going to talk about how you can categorize or validate your data using a drop-down menu, which is a pretty cool feature, especially for any kind of collaboration you're going to be doing, any of those projects where you ask everybody to put their contribution in the spreadsheet, or maybe you're working with a research team and you're combining info, any stuff like that. Data validation with sort of creating a drop-down menu in Excel is a great way to keep your data clean. So those are the things that we're going to be covering today. Also, if you guys have any specific formula questions, we can cover more specific formulas too.
Yeah. Rachel, are we going to be receiving the pro points?
Oh, yeah, I can put it to you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right. Okay, so more specifically, what we're going to cover, we ended up doing conditional formatting last week, so we won't do as much of that today, but we can review if you like. Like I said, data validation, cell and table formatting, kind of basic formulas, and then we'll get into logic formulas, which are kind of fun. All right, and then similar to last week, this is going to be like kind of hands-on, so I'll have a data set for you all to get into and be kind of doing this along as we go. All right, so with that, we're going to start with cell formatting. So when you're putting your data into your spreadsheet or you're opening your spreadsheet that you've gotten from someone else, Excel has a lot of great built-in features that are going to sort of guess what format your data is in. They're going to guess if it's a date or a number or text based on whether it's, you know, primarily numbers or primarily letters, or if it looks like a standard date format, right? So oftentimes Excel is going to get that right for you. Sometimes it's not going to get it right, and the answer and the sort of like result or thing it will display will just not make any sense. So I'm going to show you an example of that. Just going to do a blank sheet to start with a few examples before we get into our full data set for today. Hi, welcome. We're just getting started on formulas and formatting is our topic today. Okay, so just to give you an example of how cell formatting can screw you up a little bit, I'm going to do a really simple thing and just enter a number into a cell. Okay, so I'm just entering a number in here. Our number formatting sort of selector is in our home ribbon, so up at the top. And it's usually going to default to general. That's just kind of like a non-formatted option. But you can go in here and format however you like. So I can tell it that this cell is a date cell is not a date, it's just the number 75, but I can tell it that the cell is a date, and it will in fact turn this into a nonsensical date. So if you've ever opened a sheet and like nothing makes sense, or you've like pasted a column in and just everything kind of looks wrong, it's often number formatting that is the issue, because you'll see that the number 75, it's not even in our formula bar, it's not here, it's like fully disappeared. So if you accidentally format your column wrong or your cell wrong, you're going to get some confusing information. So if you have that situation, best thing to do is to go back to general to get sort of whatever the raw format of it is. And if you choose any of the more specific ones, you'll get some extra features built in. So for example, if you tell it it's a number, it's going to automatically recognize decimal points. It'll allow you to do things like add more or fewer decimal points, etc. Same deal with currency. It's going to do whatever the default currency is set to. So for us, dollars. And if you do any of the accounting stuff, it'll do even a little bit more sort of accounting standard formatting, where it'll do the like separate out the dollar sign, line up the decimal places, all that good stuff. So this menu is really handy. You're going to use this a lot, especially as you're kind of like cleaning up your data, making sure it's presentable and readable for somebody else. Another common sort of thing to be aware of with your cell formats is the difference between number and text. So let's put this back to a regular number. Maybe we're not going to have any decimal points. So I'm going to use my little decimal points thing here to remove those. But let's say somehow I'm selecting some stuff, whatever, I could accidentally set this as text. If you watch really carefully, you'll notice that text defaults to the left side of your cell and numbers are going to default to the right. So if that happens, you're going to get some like funky errors when you're trying to use this number in a formula. So if that happens, like I said, text, number, this is a good just like general troubleshooting tool if you're getting weird errors anytime you're in your data. Okay, so feel free to give it a try, open a sheet, just like type some stuff in, try the different formats. I think the nonsensical dates are really funny, that it just sort of gives you random dates. If you come in here and go under more number formats, you actually have a lot more specific options. Most of the time when you'll use these is for dates. So if you're ever doing something where you need a date in a really specific format, it needs to be a 2-digit year, or you need the month spelled out or whatever else, there's a whole bunch of these options. So you should never have to like retype all your dates into a different format. So that's a little bit handy in here. And there's other categories have more specific stuff as well. Some more like accounting choices if you want to switch the currency, stuff like that. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Cool. All right. Let's get into data validation. Okay, so this is the idea of making sure that the contents of a column follow specific rules. If you've ever made like a Google form or like a SurveyMonkey form, that kind of thing, you know that you can validate what people are putting in to say, if I have a field called email on my form, I want to make sure that people type in something that's in a valid email address format. Right? This is the same idea and is super, super helpful for collaboration, for collecting coding research data, like I mentioned, and just in general for improving the quality of your data. Even if you tell people like, all right, we're going to categorize things for, red, yellow, green for a status on each row, and you ask people to type in red, yellow, green, people are going to make typos, somebody's going to capitalize it, somebody's not, etc. So this is a tool that will allow you to essentially create a drop down in your cell. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. First, we're going to decide what our drop down options are. So I'm just going to say that our options are going to be red, yellow, green. And over here, we're going to have our projects and our status. And I'm just going to put some dummy numbers in here for our projects. Okay, so we need to put in a status for each project. We want people to put them in here as red, yellow, green. So here's what we're going to do to validate that they do that. I'm going to select these cells. I'm going to go over to my data ribbon. So that's the ribbon is the thing at the top. So I'm going to go over to the data section of that and do data validation. Move my Zoom thing out of the way so I can see. All right, so you're up here in your data ribbon. This should look similar if you're on Microsoft. I can help if it's in a slightly different spot. So you're up here in data and you come over here to data validation. Okay. Data validation gives you a bunch of handy options. The default is going to be allow any value, right? So that's like no validation, just put in whatever you want. The most helpful option that I use this for is list. So if you want to validate that any data that's coming into that column is going to be one of the options from the list, you come in here under validation criteria and just say allow from this list. And then you're going to select your data. Now, anytime you see something like this in the Excel settings with this little icon in the corner with the arrow, that means that what you can do is hit that icon. This little menu will kind of hide itself for a moment, and you can just select any cells that you want it to reference. So in this case, I'm going to select these cells right here. All right, great. Come back down here. I've got in cell drop down selected, and I'm going to hit OK. Perfect. So now when I go over to my status, I see this new thing when I'm in my cell, right? I'm in this cell, I just see the regular green highlight. But when I go over here to this one, I've got a little arrow. I've got a little drop down right here now. And when I click on the little drop down, I get my red, yellow, green options, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to say project 1 is in a green status. I go to project 2, same deal. It's in a yellow status, and I can select these options all the way down. I can change them just like a drop down menu in any other software. The other thing that's cool about this, especially for collaboration purposes, like if you're going to be sharing a sheet around with somebody else, is you can put in an error. So you can have it you can decide what the little pop-up will be if they put in something wrong. So say they try to type in purple onto here, we can set an error message that says only valid colors. And then let's see, they don't realize there's validation. They just try to type. We get this alert with my custom error message that I put in there. So this is super, super handy in groups. Yeah, what's up? Ah, okay, cool. What? Yeah, there you go. Yep. Yeah, if your screen is a little smaller, you just want to look for the green, the little green check in the red. Yeah. Good question. Mine does that if it goes a little smaller. Not on this one. Okay. All right. Make sense so far? All right. Last note about data validation. So this is an important cell concept or Excel concept. So I'm going to go back. If I select my same cells and go back to the validation, I can edit whatever validation I set up before. So I've got my settings with my list, my little error. You can also set a little message for when they go to start typing in the cell if you want to provide some instructions. Now you might notice when I went and selected my data, when I went and selected my red, yellow, green as options, it inserted G6 to G8. It was that's the normal Excel reference that we see, but it added some dollar signs in between. Does anyone know what the dollar signs are doing? Okay.
Moving the variable state.
Yes, they're keeping that place, that reference fixed. So this is what's called an absolute cell reference as opposed to just a cell reference. And this is super important because if you don't have these dollar signs here, like let's say you saw this and you just typed in G6 colon G8, I know where my range is, I'm just going to type it in. That'll work fine for your first cell. But then in your second cell, it's going to go look for G7 to G9 as your drop-down options. So then you're going to get yellow, green, blank as your 3 drop-down options. For this one, for here, you'll get green, blank, blank as your 3 drop-down options, etc. So we'll talk more about this as we get into formulas. But if you wanna have it not do that sort of automatic scrolling down logic, you got to make sure that your dollar signs are in here. So anytime that you're doing your data validation, just about anytime you use this tool, you want to make sure that you've got your absolute reference and it's a dollar sign in front of each, both the row and column references. So 4 dollar signs total to get the whole thing locked in place. Make sense? All right, cool. So what we are going to do now is get out a data set that we'll be using throughout today's session, and we'll try different formulas and different pieces of what we're learning on this data set. Okay, so this is some data from Netflix on their most watched content. It's at this link, netflix.com, TUDUM/top 10. If you want to pop that link in and scroll all the way down to the bottom, there are a few different pieces of their data that they make public to download. We're going to work with the one labeled most popular. So if you go to that link and open the one labeled most popular, it'll give you two different formats. There's an Excel format, so I would recommend that one. I'll give you all a minute to do that, and then maybe, let me know once you have it open, and we will keep going. Link working? You guys find the data set? Cool. Okay, so what we're gonna do is add a column and add one of those drop-down menus, add a validated data column with some different drop-down menu options. So you're gonna make a column that says seen or have seen. Then you're going to make a drop-down that says no, no, but on my list, yes, and I loved it, yes, and I didn't love it. You can also make your own categories, 3 or 4 categories you would use for categorizing movies and TV. So what you're going to do is open up that data set. Over off to the side, like a few columns over, you're going to do your little list of what you want your options to be. And then you're going to make your drop-down menu. So you're going to apply data validation to a new column. So there's the link. Everyone clear on what we're doing? Cool. I will go back then to this slide. So you have your little reference of how to get to validate by a list. Give you all a minute to try that out. All right, how are we doing? You got your 3 or 4 options, and then you got your column with your data validation. You can also add an error message if you want to get a little fancy with it.
Converting to Excel.
Okay.
What? Okay, I think we got an image version, so if you wanna scroll all the way down. Popular list. There you go. Yeah, you're good.
You guys good with the data set?
Ooh, a drop down menu, nice. Loved it, was all right, bad, great categories. Okay. Here's where I am. Got it. A little drop down, nice, looking good, looking good. Cool. Right. Along.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is it possible to have it click one option for multiple cells?
That's good, like if you want to select a bunch of rows. Let's give it a try. So if you select 2, then you do your drop down. Just gonna do the 1. Yeah, your best bet for that would be to just do copy paste. And it'll copy paste with the validation, so it'll still give it a little drop down. If you want to do it later, but yeah, you can copy paste the same as normal. All right, cool. There's also other validation criteria that you can do here besides list. So if you want to make sure just like everybody's entering a number, like, you know, RSVP for the party in the most nerdy way possible, put your name on the spreadsheet, number of people you're bringing. You want to make sure it's an actual number. You can choose number there as well. There's a few other options for this as well, but the most common use case for this is list. All right. How you doing back there? Got the good? All right, cool. Any questions about this before we shift to formula stuff? Cool. All right. And same deal as last week. Everything we're talking about today can be done either the same way or very similar in Google Sheets. So if you use Google Sheets for stuff, very similar, but I'm happy to show you if you want to look at that as well. All right. So let's get into formulas. Quick show of hands of who's used formulas a little bit before. Okay, great. Okay, you have a little bit. Okay, cool. So we're going to start with just some very basics. What is a formula and how does it work? So anytime you're writing a formula, it's going to be a value in your cell that starts with the equal sign. That's what's going to tell Excel that you're about to do either some math or some logic, or just kind of give it one of these function commands. If you've ever dabbled in like a learn to code course or anything like that, the concept of a function is the same here as it is in any programming language that you would learn. So the name of your function is going to be kind of what you're going to be applying to your arguments. That's your stuff inside your parentheses here. And then Excel's got a great built-in tool that will tell you what each function needs as an argument in order to give you the result that you want. So just to start with a very simple function. So it's going to look like this, equal sign, name of your function. This one is called len, stands for length. This will just give you the length. How many characters long is the string that's in my argument? So you can type equals len. You're always going to have your open close parentheses. And then for text, Excel is always going to need your double quotes. So you're going to do your double quotes and you can type in anything, your own name, you know, Excel is awesome, whatever you want, equals len, whatever, in double quotes. Close your parentheses. And when you hit enter on your keyboard, instead of seeing this, you're just going to see the number of characters. So just to give a really quick example of that, I'm going to go here. You'll be able to see it up in the formula bar here. I'm going to go len, my name, close my double quotes, close my parentheses. Boom. So my name, 13 characters long. Now you'll notice when I'm here, I can see my 13, but when I'm up in my formula bar, I can see my formula. And the other thing you'll notice about this one is that it's going to count every character, including spaces. So my first name is 6 letters, my last name is 6 letters. There's a space in between. So this is going to spit out 13 characters. So go ahead and give that a try for your own name. Just get a sense of how it works. The key is to make sure you're starting with the equal sign. Don't put a space before the equal sign. That won't work. Got to start it directly with the equal sign so that it knows it's a formula. With me so far in formulas. Cool. All right. So what I mentioned before, formula builder, this is a really handy thing in Excel as you're getting used to using formulas and functions to see what all they do and to get a quick little explainer. Okay, so what you can do in any cell, and as you get more into Excel, you'll start to memorize your favorite ones, but even when I'm like using a formula I don't use that often, I will pull this up so that I remember what's in there. You go to your insert menu in the top, so it's not in your ribbon in here, insert and then function, and then you'll get this fun little pop-up over on the side, which will give you all the possible functions. You can search in here like, is there a function for average? I can search, I could spell, yeah, I can search for average, for example. It'll give me a little definition and it'll give me my syntax. So this is the thing I put in after the equal sign, average. They'll display them in all caps. You don't actually have to type them in all caps if you don't want to. And then in parentheses, what you need to put in the parentheses and what those things are. Cool. This is even a little bit more advanced. So for example, if I go find my length function right here and I do my insert function button, it'll actually help me out a little bit. It'll give me a little form to put in. So I could just put in some text right here. Grab my quotes. Okay, I'm going to put in some text. I'm going to put in quotes to tell it that it's text. Then I'm going to hit done. And it's created the little formula right here for me, even though all I did was click insert and then type in my arguments over here. So this is a great way to kind of ease into formulas or use a new one that you haven't used before. Okay, everyone good with how to find formula builder? All right. Great, so it's your insert and then function from your top bar there. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of formulas that you can do. So math formulas are maybe some of the most obvious functions that you might be using in Excel. It's going to accept all of the basic kind of math operators, so plus, minus, divide, etc. And those you're primarily going to use in your row, like across a row. So this connects to our concept from last week, which is if you have a piece of information about the row, it should live in that same row. So you shouldn't, if you have a bunch of rows of information, you shouldn't like go down to the bottom of your sheet and start a new spot where you're adding row-based information. You should put it in the same row. Okay. So as a very simple example, right, if you have a bunch of data on the length and the width of, I don't know, maybe tables or desks, you can do a very simple formula. So you're going to start with your equal sign again. You're going to select your width cell. So in this case, it happened to be E16, but you can select it with your mouse, or you can type in E16, do asterisk for multiplication, same deal, select this other cell, hit enter. And you've got your calculation of the area of your desk. If you have a bunch of columns of those information, same deal that we talked about last time, you can, once this formula is here, you can double click on the bottom of the cell highlight and it'll autofill all the way down your column with that info. Okay, so those are some very simple examples of row-based formulas. There's other more complicated math stuff, but this is, it all works the same way. Okay, now when we think about other kind of math stuff we might want to do with our data, we might want to summarize, right? We might want something like the average or the sum or the total number, right? Say it's your party RSVPs, how many people are coming, stuff like that. Those we're going to think of as column-based formulas because primarily the way you're going to use those is to not have that information in the row because it's not going to be related to that specific individual, but you might put it down at the bottom of your column, for example. So if this is a bunch of data that I have about the length and width of some desks, including this really large 12.5-foot wide desk that I have, I've got my area formula, which is the same one that's up here, calculating for each row. I can come right into the bottom of my little data table here and do my average formula. So this is my column-based formula to summarize the average of the full set of data that I've selected. So same deal, do my equal sign, average, my parentheses. And then if I just click and drag my mouse or do shift and my arrow keys, I can select a whole different number of cells, which will give me this little setup with the colon here. Again, you can type this in if you prefer, hit enter, and you'll get your average. Okay, make sense about the difference between like a row-based formula and a column-based formula? Make sense? All right, there's a bunch of these as well, whole bunch. Some common ones you might use would be sum, average. You can get the minimum of a list, the maximum of a list. You can do percentiles. Those are some examples of column-based kind of summary formulas. All right. Another very common kind of formula that you'll use is date formulas. So a great sort of tool for date formulas is sort of a simple function called today. Today is fun because it doesn't require any arguments. It's just equals today, open and close parentheses. That will always return today's date. Now, it's not the date you made the sheet, it's the date you've opened the sheet. So if you put that formula in the sheet today, close it all up, open it again tomorrow, it'll be tomorrow's date tomorrow, right? This is super handy because it allows you to calculate things like lengths of time. So for example, how many days has it been since New Year's? How many days into 2024 are we? We can do our same simple math with our today formula. So I'm going to do my equal sign. I'm going to do today minus, then I'm going to do a standard date format here, year, month, day with dashes in between. I've got my quotes, and this will tell me how many days into the new year we are. Now, there's 31 days in January. If it's February 5th, I could guesstimate that we're like 35, 36 days into the new year. But that's just kind of a simple example. just to show you how this works, I come in here, I do my equals today. Open close parentheses, boom, gives me today's date. I could use my cell formatting that we talked about earlier to format this date however I wanted. Maybe I want my long date. So I can just change my formatting and it's spelled out here. And then what I can also do is find out how many days it is until my birthday. So maybe I'll come down here and I'm going to do my today. And then I'm going to say, all right, my birthday is coming up. So I want to know, ooh, go there. Okay, so I want to know how many days until my birthday. So I'm going to put in my birthday right here. My upcoming birthday is this. And then I'm just going to subtract from today's date from my upcoming birthday so we can see how many days it is till my birthday. All right. That is not a number of days to my birthday. That is a weirdly formatted date. So this is this problem I was talking about at the beginning, right? Excel didn't know what format this was going to be. So it's putting it as some date in the year 2000. I'm going to fix it by coming back up to my number format bar. I'm going to change this to a number. 109 days till my birthday. Okay, make sense? Everyone feel free to figure out how many days until your own birthday. Okay, so those are some of our simplest date functions. There's a bunch more advanced date formulas. So same deal, I'm going to go back to my formula builder, which again was from insert and then function in my menu. And I can come in here and I can look at some of my other date functions. So I'm just going to browse through these here. There's a bunch of different categories. Don't get overwhelmed, but let's see. Oh no, just go past it. I want a day. Go search. Example. Okay, great. So returns the day of the month. So I could come in and put oh no, so I'm sorry, one of my days here. Okay. So this does a very similar thing to what I just did with my subtraction. The formula days is going to have me put in 2 dates, and it's just going to specifically return the number of days in between. Same deal as the basic subtraction that I just did over here. Going to do it in a simple function. There's a bunch of other ones. There's one for month. There's a few others. You can like extract part of the date and just get the name of the month, stuff like that. I think it's going to be called month. Yeah. So a bunch of different options for date related formulas, which are super helpful for length of time, duration, stuff like that. We're pretty good on date formulas. All right, cool. All right, another very helpful category of formulas is text formulas. Text formulas will save you from a lot of really annoying formatting work. All right, so helpful things that you can do with text formulas. You can concatenate two or more sections of text. That's essentially just gluing pieces of text together. You can grab characters from the right end of a piece of text, from the left end of a piece of text. You can substitute a string or phrase within your text for another one. And you can fix capitalization, stuff like get everybody's name in proper, which is the first letter capitalized, everything else lowercase, categorization or capitalization, uppercase, lowercase, etc. So this is one of those things where if you got to do a bunch of annoying formatting, you could do it by hand, but one of these formulas would make it a lot easier for you. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to try concatenate, same thing, equals concatenate, it's kind of a long word. Maybe I want to concatenate my first name and I want to put a space in between and I want to put my last name. Okay, so I'm surrounding all of the things I want to put together in my double quotes. You'll see in the little help text that pops up right here that it's kind of doing a ... of more arguments that I can put in these brackets. That means that it's optional how many I can put in. So I could concatenate 2 things together or 17 things together. It'll give me that option. So my parentheses, hit enter, and now it's going to display my name, first name, space, last name, because it's concatenating these 3 strings together. Make sense? All right, great. Same deal with these other ones. So if I wanted to, for example, look at my left function. All right, great. So same deal here. So if I said I want to take the first 5 characters of my name, what would that be? I can use my left or my right function, and it's just going to be the literal left and right on your screen. So let's say I'm going to say left. I'm going to get the first 5 letters of my name. So I'm going to go up and grab this text. So in this case, I'm just going to go up with my arrow keys there, do a comma, and then I'm going to say first 5 letters, hit enter, and it's grabbed the first 5 letters of my name. I could do the same. I could swap out my function. So once you've already got a formula written, it's easiest to edit if you go up to the formula bar at the top. So I select my cell, go back up to my formula bar. Then I'm just going to switch this for the right function instead. You see it's got the same arguments, text, and then a number of characters. Then it's going to grab the 5 characters on the right-hand side of the cell. So left, right, very straightforward. Okay. And then same deal with our capitalization stuff. Just to give you an example, I'm going to go in here and say, I want this to be upper. And just grab this piece of text, just the one argument, hit enter, and now it's changed this into all caps. Okay, lower works the same way, proper works the same way. All right, any questions about basic text formulas? Make sense? All right, cool. One more piece and then we're going to get back into our data set for some more practice. Okay. The last kind of basic category of common functions is logic functions. So these are going to be based on your rows. So this is something about your row. So it's going to be in your row, something where you create a new column and have a result for each row in your data set. So these are going to be all your standard logic operators, things like and, if, not, or. These are super helpful for cases where maybe you've got a bunch of columns of data and you want to know, has everybody attended at least 1 week of the class, right? If I've got a column for attended week 1, a column for attended week 2, a column for attended week 3, and I want to be able to summarize who all attended at least one of those classes, I could do an or statement here. My or is I'm going to put in my 2 arguments, so the information in my 2 cells, and it's going to return a true false value. So these are all based on kind of like true false logic, which is super helpful. We'll get into these later when we combine with more functions also, but these are really helpful to combine. So for example, let's see. So if I've got some data up here, let's call this week 1, true, false. And then we've got week 2, false, true. And I just want to know, all right, who all has attended either week? I could come in here and do my equal sign for my formula, do my or for my operator, and then it's going to give me my little pop-up to remind me what I can do. I'm just going to do this cell, comma, this cell. We can see it's another one of these where I could put infinitely many if I wanted to. I'm going to close that. And the answer to did this person attend week 1 or week 2 is true. All right, same deal if I go down. This one's attended week 2 and not week 1, but still holds for my logic either week. All right, true, false stuff makes sense? All right, cool. The other most powerful one of these that you'll use a lot is this if logic. So if is great because you can give it a condition, something it should be looking for. And then based on the result, you can have it put a different value into your cell. So this again can be really helpful for cleaning up data. So for example, if I said, I want to know who all attended, yeah, let's say I basically want to like reformat this. So instead of it just being true, false, I want it to say attended or not attended. I could do my same thing here. So I could hop in my formula. I could do my if statement. So I'm going to do my if, open my parentheses. First thing is going to be my logical test. Maybe a bit easier to, here, let's do it this based on project number. So easier to show. Okay. So if I do my equal sign, my if, let's say my logical test is my project number greater or less than 3? I'm gonna say if it's greater than 3, then I want it to show big number. And then otherwise, so it's gonna pop up with my little suggestion here. Value if false is my other argument, so I can have something else appear in the cell. So I'm gonna say small number for this one. Close my quotes, close my parentheses, hit enter. All right, so what this formula is doing is it's going over to cell A2. It's saying, is that bigger than 3? Nope, it's not. So it's going to skip over to this last value if false side and put in that value into this cell. So if I expand this formula down, then this one is going to test, is 2 bigger than 3? Nope. So we'll skip to my value of false. Is 3 bigger than 3? Nope. So it's going to skip to my value of false. And then is 4 bigger than 3? Yes. So it's going to go to my value if true, which is big number. Okay. Everybody with me on the concept of how that works? All right, cool. Okay. So what we're going to do next is apply some of these formula ideas to our Netflix data sets, the same one that I had you download a couple minutes ago. All right, this is the same one. You're going to create a few new columns in your data set using the things that we just talked about. I would recommend, if this is one of your first times using formulas, to use the formula builder on your right-hand side. So to go in, do your insert formula, and then you can come here and either scroll down or search for the formula that you want to use. So I'm going to give you some tasks. All right, first thing you're going to do is make a new column for category. So in our data set right here, the category is films English, films non-English, etc. So you want to create a new column that's, you can call it, you know, category 2, something like that. And you're going to substitute anywhere it says films for the word movies using a formula. Okay, so if you go in your formula builder, this formula is called substitute. So I'm going to go on my insert function. I'm going to search for the formula labeled substitute. And then I'm going to look at my little syntax that I get down here. So first thing it's going to want is the text. So maybe I would put in my cell A2, the old text. So that's films. Remember, you always want to put text in quotes. Your new text will be movies in this case. And then instance number, you're like, what's instance number? You're going to look down here at your little reference. This says which occurrence you want to replace. So you have a really long string. I might say the word film several times. You only want to replace the third one. That would be a different task. If omitted, every instance is replaced. So you can leave this off, just do your first 3 arguments, and it'll replace anytime it sees the word films with the word movies. All right. Okay. So go ahead and give that a try. Next task, if you're done with that already, is add another column, and we want the first 3 letters of every of the titles of the content. So first 3 letters would either be our left or right functions that we were using before. Give me a thumbs up when you feel like you got that piece working, or if you run into a roadblock. All right. How do we do with the substituting movies for films? Can we figure that out? Okay, we got one over here, back here. Good, good. All right. All right. How do we do with first three letters of each piece of content? Which function did you use for that one? All right, if you're done with that. For the TV shows, you'll see in our data set that we've got not only a show title, but a season title. So I want you to create a new column with the show title followed by a dash, followed by the season title using one of the formulas we just talked about. If you're feeling fancy, you can also first put the show title in all caps and then do the dash with the season title. All right, how are we doing with number 3? Show title dash season title. Good. All right, what you got for a formula for that one? Okay, cool. Yep, but upper is totally right for the first part. So if I wanted the show title in all caps, I would do upper, and then my argument is just whatever the show title cell that the show title is in. Cool.
Fortunately, forgot that I have a meeting in 5 minutes.
All right, you're all good.
I am so sorry.
You're totally fine.
Thank you.
No problem. Maybe I'll see you next week.
Yes, I won't have a meeting. Sorry.
Sounds good. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, how you doing with number 3 over here?
Oh, figured it out.
Figured it out? Okay, what you got? What you got for your formula?
I got A equals left, the show title, and then comma 30 for 3 characters.
Okay, perfect, cool. And then how about this guy connecting the season title to the show title?
Oh, I'm in that one then. I'm in 3.
You're working on that one? Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
I already thought like on the case. But I used the content,
Yes, concatenate, yes.
but does it matter right?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, so I would just create a new formula or a new column. Yeah. Sure. And then populate it. Yep. Yeah, no problem.
Finished it.
Good. Okay, what you got?
I got A equals concatenate, parentheses upper, then the show titles, then comma, then the dash, then comma, and then the season title.
Okay, perfect. Good.
How you doing over here with concatenate? Good? Okay, sweet. All right, next thing, let's try just the basic math ones. Maybe you've used these before, but let's get views per day. So when we look at our data set, we scroll over to the right here, we have this last column is called views first 91 days. So I want to know for each of these rows, what is if this is the number of views for 91 days, what's been our average views per day? This will be a math function. So the views for 91 days, what are the views for 1 day? Holler when you got it. How we doing? Views for 91 days? Ooh,
I know the rows and then just divided by 91.
There you go. Even simpler. Yes. Yes, good. Yeah, we'll get to average more in a second, but yeah, so the reason it's not average is because of this piece that we're talking about for each show, what is their views for 91 days? And so average is normally gonna be for more, like for summarizing our full data set. But because this is about our row, we want to use one of our more like row-based kind of functions. Yeah. So super easy. We're just dividing by 91. Fantastic. So if I go for my first one here, for example. Ooh, oh, because I put my data validation there. Let's try my other cell. All right, over here, divide by 91. Ooh, still a big number. It's a lot of views. It's like still 2 million views or something per day. Okay. Cool. All right. Next up. All right, we're going to try some logic formulas. So we're going to do a column where we want it to say true if the hours viewed is over 200 million, a lot of hours of viewing, and false otherwise. All right, so we've got a column in here, hours viewed. So I want to add a column that's going to be true if this number is over 200 million and false otherwise. This will be one of our logic formulas. All right, which formula are we using for this one?
The if statement.
If statement, very good. It's a little sneaky. It's in the sentence. Like Jeopardy, you're not supposed to use the question and then the answer or whatever it is. All right. How we doing? Yeah? Okay, what you got for your formula?
I highlighted if highlight rows then greater than 200 million, comma, parentheses, quotations true, comma, quotations false.
Perfect.
Okay, great. That is perfect. The one like kind of funky thing about true and false, Excel will also recognize them as like Boolean values, true, false. So for these words specifically, if you don't need them to be text, you can actually do them without the quotes and it'll still work. But if you want text, you can do it with the quotes. Works totally fine. You doing all right over here? Cool. Do you remind me of your name? I'm sorry. Lucas? Lucas. All right, cool. All right, great. Okay, cool. And the last thing I had on here was our drop-down menu, which we already did. So, all right, basic formulas, feeling good. We've got a few new columns in our data set. Awesome. Anytime you add a new column, in general, it's good to put something in your column header so that you know what your column was. Also make it easier if you need to sort and filter later. So go ahead and add column headers if you didn't do that already. Okay. Let's talk about a couple more logic formulas. So we did our very basic logic formulas. Now we're going to get into our more complex logic formulas. These are going to be our column-based ones. So again, this is our formulas that are going to help us summarize our information. Not that you can't use them in rows, but the more common use case for these is going to be sort of column-based. So these ones are called count if, sum if, and count blank. There's a few others, but these are going to be some of the common ones that you'll see. So for count if, a count if argument would look something like this. So you would use count if you're trying to get a number of how many things in or how many rows in your data set are going to meet a certain criteria. Okay. So for count if, you're going to have your two arguments. You're going to have your cells. So I'm seeing my colon here. So that means it's a range of cells. It's going to meet this criteria. Now, the criteria in these are a little funky. Even though this isn't text exactly, you do have to put it in the double quote so that it recognizes it as a math expression and not two separate characters. But what this function will do is it'll look at all of these cells in this range. It'll look for any that meet this criteria greater than 2, and then it'll just spit out a number. Okay, so for example, if I go back to my very simple thing that I have here, if I'm going to do my equals, my count if, open my parentheses, so it's going to give me range criteria. So for range, I can either type or select. Since this is a small data set, I'm just going to do it with my mouse, select, comma, criteria. So I'm going to put my math criteria in my double quotes, greater than 2, close my quote, close my parentheses, hit enter. And it's going to say that of these 4 numbers, 2 of them are greater than 2. Pretty straightforward, not something I need a formula for, but a demonstration of how it works. Make sense? Cool. All right, sum if, this is arguably an even more powerful one. So this is a very similar construct to count if, but it has one more argument. All right, so what sum if is going to do, it's going to look at the cells here. It's going to check against this criteria. So same thing that we did in count, but instead of just counting how many meet that criteria, it'll go over to these rows and add up the values in the corresponding rows. Okay, so for example, if I said, all right, I want to add up, I'm going to look at this. Let's do it based on status. So I want to add up the project numbers of all my projects that are in a red status. Okay, so this is going to look very similar. I'm going to do my equals sum if. I'm going to go grab my range. So this is just going to be these 4 cells. My criteria is that these guys say red. And then for my range, I'm going to grab, so this range needs to have the same number of rows as this range. So it's rows 2 to 5, rows 2 to 5 here. I'll hit enter. And this is going to say, all right, for any of the rows where this is red, go over to this column and grab that value and add it up. Make sense? All right, cool. And then there's a count blank, which is very similar to count if. It's just going to count any blank values in your rows. That's helpful for large data sets to see sort of like if you're trying to get to a % of things that are blank, stuff like that. All right. Cool. So now we're going to go back to our data set and do a couple more things. So we just did, in our last round, we just did a bunch of adding row-based information. So we added a bunch of columns and more information for each show. What we're going to do now is add some overall summary information. Okay, so just a quick initial one, just what's the total hours viewed? So just a sum of that whole column. Okay, for hours viewed. Then I would like to get the average runtime. The runtime in here is in hours, but I would like the runtime in minutes. Okay, the average runtime of that whole column, but in minutes. Okay. For those. So my sum of hours viewed is just gonna look something like this, right? Equals sum. Just gonna go grab my column here. Whole column, hit enter. And I get my sum of all those hours. That is so many hours of people watching TV. Oh my God. All right. What about our second one? Average runtime converted to minutes. Shout it out when you got it.
What's the units for the runtime currently?
Hours. Good question. I were gonna send this data set to somebody, I might put that in the heading, runtime in hours.
I think I got it.
All right, what you got?
I got 286.815.
Okay, cool. And what'd you put in for your formula to get to that?
The average times 60.
Perfect. There you go. Yeah, so you can do that two ways. So though you can use the math with formulas, the same way you can do in math class. So for example, here I can do average of this column. So I'm gonna come in and grab my whole column. Here, close my parentheses, and then I'm just doing my times 60 like we did in other math. Boom. Works just the same way. So it's just treating my average chunk as whatever the answer to that formula is times 60. Cool. Yeah.
No, for like formulas like average or sum, standard deviation, is it normal to like just put those at the end of the rows for each of the data sets?
Kind of depends. A lot of this is a very common way to do if you're just doing like some ad hoc analysis, or if your data set is on the smaller side, like you don't have to scroll that far. This is a great way to just kind of check. You can also do formula, like again, for if you're doing like just some quick like checks and like, how's my data looking? A common thing people do is just like come over here and do your formula. And if you do this, and let's say your data set's really long and you don't want to go like scrolling all the way down, you can just select your whole column. So it'll just go F to F in the top and not even give any row numbers. And you can like put it over here so it's a little more easily readable. That's a like very valid way to do sort of like ad hoc. You're doing your homework, you're like throwing together your event, whatever. Yes. If you're going to be like if this is like a more in-depth analysis, you're going to be sending it to someone or the client or something like that. You'd probably want to do a new sheet in here and do your formulas all in one place. So then I might like do some nice formatting here. I might type like average runtime in minutes. And then I can do my formula, and I'm gonna like do my columns all nice, right? I would like put a bunch of labels in here, and I can do my formula here by just clicking over to my other sheet after I hit my equal sign. And then you see in the formula bar, it's giving the name of this tab So it's like coming over and grabbing that. I can come over and do my runtime. Boom. Of course, I forgot to actually type in my formula. Come over here to my average. Boom. Hit enter. And then it's showing up here. So yeah, so if you were going to do this as like your final product, you would want to like format it all nicely in one spot. But yeah, it just kind of depends on what you're doing. Does that make sense? Cool. One reason that you wouldn't want to put them at the bottom is if so, for example, like what I just did. So I did the runtime when we just talked about it. I did the average right here in this column. And then I went over to this sheet and I averaged the entire column. So what did I do here? I like averaged the average back in. Okay. So if that had been a sum or something, that would be like messing with my data quality. So if you're going to do any further steps with that data set, you don't want to just leave that stuff at the bottom because that could happen. So that's one case where you definitely don't want to do it. Cool. All right. So over here, we have our first column in this data set is category, and you can see we've got 4 categories: films English, films non-English, TV English, TV non-English. I would like for you to grab the average runtime for each of those 4 categories. Okay, so you should have 4 answers, an average for each one of them. There's a couple different ways you can do this one with the formulas that we talked about today. And you can leave this one in hours if you want. All right, how are we doing on an average for each of the categories?
I think I'm overcomplicating it.
Okay, what you got so far?
Oh, I was trying to do an if statement. I
Mm,
think it might be easier to just like get the averages directly from.
either of those would work. Yeah, that's the great thing about Excel. There tend to be a few different ways to do things. Usually your options are like do it in maybe a couple different steps. Maybe like with your formulas, or maybe you're gonna like paste it over here and then do something else. It's totally valid. And as you get more comfortable with it, you'll get more comfortable with combining formulas, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But you can totally do this one a few different ways. So do it like the simplest way that you can think of first is usually a good place to start.
Is the runtime also already in hours?
Yes, it's already in hours. Yep.
Got it.
All right, what you got?
That says 2.06667, 1.95, 8.23334, and 32.318195.
All right, cool. And what,
Average of each of the categories.
okay, so you like selected each as a separate range and got your average that way?
Yeah.
Cool, that totally works, especially for smaller data set like this, that works totally fine. What about over here? You do the same thing? Same thing? Cool. All right, great. Okay, so that totally works, right? So the great thing about Excel is whichever formula you happen to like remember in the moment or like seems easier in the moment, you can totally use. So yeah, that works totally great for this. There's like much more complicated ways that we could do this. One way that we could do this would be to combine a bunch of the different stuff that we've learned from this week. So let's say I'm gonna come here and select all my categories, paste them over here for a moment. All right, this is something we covered last week. So one thing I could do in here is come in to my data ribbon. I could remove my duplicate values from this guy. So I'm going to say, all right, I only want to know what are my unique categories. Okay, great. I've got my 4 unique categories. I could come over here and say, all right, let's see, what was this? This was hours. That was what we wanted. Average runtime in hours. Okay. So I could come over here and do a sum if. And I could say, all right, I'm going to sum if, so I'm going to sum my hours, go down here, look at my total sum my hours if my, oh, I did that backwards. Okay, sorry, I'm going to sum, okay, the range that I'm going to check, important to do this. Okay, the range I'm going to check is this range, right? So I'm going to check my category. If my category equals, and then for my criteria, I'm just going to pick this value right here. If it's equal to that, then I'm going to come over and sum from my column E, checking that my numbers are the same, row 2 to 41, row 2 to 42. That's a little different. Got an extra value in there. Just going to backspace and go to 1. All right, so then I've got my sum total hours, I'll call this. Whew. Drag this down. And this is cool that I can drag this down because I've already got my values. So then when I look at my formula in my second row, it's comparing to L3, but I've got a little error here, right? Because now it's only summing from A3 further down. So to correct that error, I come back to this cell and I want my ranges to be the same here. So I'm going to do my dollar signs. All right, so our dollar signs were the absolute reference from earlier, and the absolute reference locks it in, as you said, right? I'll come in and lock these cells in right here. So I'm putting my dollar signs. Same deal here. You got to put dollar signs before all of them to make sure they're fully not going to move anywhere. I'm going to do that. Okay, great. And then I'm going to repaste this right over here. And now I've got these cells are locked into place. All right, so it's going to lock those references. But my middle one, so up here it's L2 is my second argument because it's going to come reference this guy. Then my second one's got L3, L4, L5. So it's coming over in reference. So that's to get my sum. And then for average, I know that these are top 10 lists. So I could just come over here and do divide by 10 for each of these. It's another way to do it. Use a bunch of the different tools. No more or less valid than the other way to do it. Just totally depends. Make sense? Cool. All right. Okay, let's try out a sum if. All right, so I want you to find the total number of views. So views instead of hours, views is our column G here on mine, maybe different on yours if you've added a bunch of columns. So our views, what is the sum of the total views for content that is ranked 1 to 5? So not including any of the content that is ranked 6 through 10 in its respective list. What are the total views of the content in all categories total together? So one value that is ranked 1 through 5.
For views, is it the hours view or the views for the first 91 days?
Yeah, let's go views for first 91 days, yeah.
I think I got it.
All right, what you got for your formula?
Sum in, then highlighted the rows of the ranks,
Okay,
comma, quotations greater than 5,
perfect.
and then highlighted the runtime. Although, are we including 5 into the sum?
Good question. 1 through 5, yeah, that's included, but you had greater than 5. Yeah,
I just need the equals. So that it includes 5, right?
I sorry, do you have less than 5 or do you have greater than
I
5?
just created it.
Okay, so you want to do less than 5 because we want 1 to 5, yeah. Less than, yeah, it'd be less than or equal to 5, or you could do less than 6 if you wanted. Cool, but yeah, so you totally got it. So the key is to get your criteria in the quotes, otherwise it's gonna get mad and give you some errors. Lucas, how you doing over here? Similar? Okay, cool. Let me know if you're stuck. Cool. All right, great. And then, all right, this might be another, could do this one in a couple steps, but I want to know of all these 40 pieces of content, what % of them have a runtime greater than 2 hours? So the runtime as it comes is already in hours. So of all of these pieces of content, how many of them have a runtime greater than 2 hours, or what is the % of them that have a runtime greater than 2 hours? Again, a few different ways you could do this with the formulas that we talked about. All right, holler when you think you got it, or if you get stuck. Okay, what do you got for, how do you feel? Okay, that's the concept. Okay, okay. Okay, yes, okay, so the first, okay, we got the first logical step, which is the runtime greater than 2 hours or not for each show? So if you shrink the problem down to that step,
how would you find, which tool would you use for that? You just wanna say, okay, for each show, is the runtime greater than 2 hours or not? Yeah, that's great. Okay, so, so we were talking about. We've got our runtime. We wanna know, is it greater than 2 hours or not? So we have a criteria. We have a thing that if we want it to be like, yes, if is greater than 2 hours, and no, if it's not greater than 2 hours. Right? Yeah, for this part of it, you could just do if statements. You can add a column for your if, just call it your column like is greater than 2. And then do your if statement to do that. We can do that as a first step. And then once you have that piece.
I think I got it.
Alright, what you got over there?
I gotta count it.
Okay.
For highlighting the rows for the runtime,
Okay,
and then comma greater than 2. And then dividing that by the sum of the total runtimes, and then taking the percent, the number to turn it into percent.
perfect. Okay, very close. I think your denominator on the percent, you added up all the runtime. Right, but we wanna know the percentage of the content, so of the number of our 40 pieces of our 20 movies and our 20 shows, how many of those have more than 2 hours? So we don't want our denominator to be the sum of the runtime, we want it to be the number of things in our list. Let's see if we can make an update there. Okay, how you doing your if? So. For this one, we can just put true. Yep. Perfect. Let's do that. Very cool. So we got, all right, logical test. Yep, there you go. So what are you missing from your logical test? So maybe we gotta tell it that it's a math expression, yeah. Cool, let's try that. We gotta give it a cell, okay, yeah, so we gotta give it. Okay, yeah, we gotta tell it what should be greater than 2. Yeah, so, okay, sorry. So. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so for this one, what we're just gonna do is we're figuring out for each show. So you would just wanna do for one cell, so just whichever row you're in right now, row 4, it looks like, so you want to grab your N4. Is N4 greater than 2? It gets a little funky once you have stuff in there. Yeah. Plus N2, and I think this would, yeah, if you're doing a cell. Great, done. Okay, great. Then you're gonna have false. We've got a true, false. So we want to find that out for every show. So we're gonna paste that all the way down your column. You can do control paste, or another handy one if you select your cell there and double click on that little dot in the corner. Double click there. Yeah, and it should flash fill, I think it's called. Oh, because you don't have a header. You can like drag the copy paste there. If you have a header and you double click there, it'll like autofill the built-in rows. Yeah. Okay. So now you got a true false all the way down for each of your shows. So now we want to figure out, okay, so for our shows that are true, how many of them, like how many are true over our full 40? So we want to count all of our shows with a certain condition. Great, okay. Yep, your full column. Yeah, do you want to grab the ones that are true, or do you want to grab the ones that are false? Great. Cool, what do you get, 20, is that 28? Okay, so 28, and we had a total of how many pieces of content in the sheet? Okay, so if we want to get a percent, we would do. Genius, there you go. Perfect. Okay, cool. All right, so if you guys were listening to what each other was doing, we did that problem in 2 different ways, but both totally worked. We got our answer. So just another example, these are all tools that you can kind of like combine in different ways, might depend on how you want to do it. For example, yours involved adding a column. That might be helpful if you're going to then use that column in a bunch of other calculations. It might make sense to do that column once and then have your options based on it. If you're just trying to get this one number, it might make more sense to do it the way that you did it, which is just stacking your formulas together. Make sense? All right, cool. All right, one more fun thing that we can do now that you've got your data, a few columns, you want to make sure you have a header for all of your columns. Once you have a bunch of data, if you hit, what is it, Command A or Control A on your keyboard, you can do some fun formatting stuff. This is just like, I don't know, this is like a little fun bonus. If you come into your home ribbon and do Format as Table, you got some really nice built-in stuff where it'll just do some highlighting, highlight the header row, do some stuff like this. I like blue, so I might pick this one. Tell it if you've got your headers. That's a trick question. You should always have headers on your data, okay? And then it's gonna do some nice highlighting stuff, formatting. This is a total just like bonus, but again, if you're ever gonna send this sheet to somebody or this sheet is more of your final product, this is really nice. So you can go in and try one of those if you want. Favorite color, I don't know, kind of a nice touch. Also, if you're the person like staring at the data for a long time, the alternating like white gray of the rows helps your eyes a little bit. So if it's like data that you're closely reviewing, that is a helpful little tip. Okay, our last major point on formulas. So we've talked about this in a few, we've kind of like brushed on this as we've been going through formulas. But combining formulas is where they get really, really powerful. So the best way to figure out what you were trying to do is to chunk out each step of your formula. So that's exactly what we did over here, right? We're like, okay, I don't quite know how to do this all as one formula. What's one piece of the problem? Just does each show meet this criteria or not? That's how we got our if column. That's a great way to figure it out. And then once you've figured out those intermediate steps, you can combine your formulas. So we've already started doing this, but just to make it clear what we're doing, if I wanted to get rid of all the spaces in my name and then find how many characters was left over, right? Because when I did my name earlier, it was 13 characters, including the space. I'm going to do 2 different formulas. So I could do 2 different columns, right? I could do one column that is substitute, text of my name, or I could reference the cell. And then I'm going to put a space between 2 quotes and then just nothing between 2 quotes. That's a good way to get rid of like white space and spaces if you need to clear that out of your data. So I'm going to substitute this. That's going to give me something, a value that looks like this, right? It's just going to squish all my characters together. And then I could have another column that is just the formula length. And then it's just doing this part. So it's just going to count. So if I want to combine those formulas, you just imagine your one formula going into that same spot in the argument of your other formula. And you could just write this in one cell, this whole thing, and get the same result as running this formula and then this formula. Does that make sense? We've already kind of been doing this as we've been going through kind of like stacking our formulas together. But this is what you're doing. You can get really like complicated with this. You can do a bunch of layers in here. You could do like a count if, and then a sum if, and then an or, and you know, like you can like stack these all together. Sometimes that's super helpful. I would recommend not stacking more than like 3 or 4 formulas in an individual column, only because that's going to be harder for you or whoever's reading your sheet to understand what you're doing in that column. So I would recommend not stacking more than like 3 or 4 of these together. Also because you're more likely to get errors, like you forget to have like your 5 closing parentheses on this side, gets a little funky. It can be harder to troubleshoot, but stacking them together is super, super powerful. The concept of stacking them together makes sense. You can do this with pretty much any formula, any of the math ones we talked about, any of the column-based ones we talked about. They can all stack together. Make sense? Okay. So we've already done this in a few places, but this is like a common kind of like data type of task that you might need to do. So we might have like a chunk of information and we need to generate a URL following some format, like a URL or an email address or a title, something like that, for each show. So what I want you to do is to try to do this one all in one
formula without having to do multiple columns. But if you need to figure it out what to do, you can do each part in a separate column. So what I want to get for each show is some link like this, netflix.com/ the name of the show with no spaces and all lowercase. I want one of those in each row of your sheet for each of those 40 pieces of content. Does that make sense? So we're pretending we work at Netflix and we need to generate a link for each of our top shows. So there's a few different things we need to do there. So you can first kind of write them out in separate columns to see how they are, make sure you're getting the right thing. And then I want you to try to do it all in one formula to get from your current data format to a link like that. All right, let me know if you when you think you got it or if you get stuck. Yeah.
Sure, like, there's actually good-
Mhm.
the titles, the case,
Okay.
uh, how-
Okay. Do you want to stick the text of the link with the text that you just generated?
so like,
Yep, great. Okay. So what would be the first part? So your concatenate, you're going to need your two arguments. You're going to use, you need this string that I've already given you and then the strings that you generated, right? So would you put first in your concatenate? Yep. Yeah, exactly. Parentheses, so then your, yes, you need your first thing is your www.netflix.com, and the second thing is that lowercase string that you generate.
almost have it done. I'm just trying to figure out how to remove the white space.
Ooh, how to remove the white space. All right. Pro tip on the white space. We just talked about it. So you can think of getting rid of white space as you want to substitute the white space for what?
For nothing.
For nothing, exactly. Okay. Shooting errors is an important part of learning Excel. Should figure out the whole thing quotes. One of the common places to trip up when you're stacking formulas is your parentheses. So I would see if we can get your parentheses. Looks like we need some extra ones, but after we had a probably one there. And then it's your first argument from concatenate that would say, yes, it's highlight your text one, great. Then if you put your lower thing, highlight text two, since we got it your second argument, great. Then let's click on your substitute. So it's going to grab your text. Okay, great. Text, space, minus space. Okay, and then let's count our closing parentheses. So how many opening parentheses total do we have? 3, and then that's 3 at the end. Let's see if that was our trick. All right. Ooh, it's gonna try to help you out. Okay, let's see if we can see what it's doing. Okay, that did it. Nice. All right, cool. How does that look? Okay, looking good. And what is your column missing? Header. Yes, very good. All right. Nice. Looking pretty good. All right. How you doing over here? You got it? All right. What'd you get for your formula over here, Lucas? Yep, perfect. Was everything all that? Perfect. What about you over here? What did you get?
Excel just stood up on me.
Oh no, you crashed your Excel. All right, cool. Did you have something similar to that? Yours.
I just reversed the substitute and the lower. So I could substitute before lower.
Great. Okay, that's a great example of so all of the functions are interchangeable. So the same thing like we were doing before with our average, we could have converted to minutes first and then done the average, or we could do the average and then convert to minutes. That's another great example. If we can flip flop in what's that called in math? The thing where you can like switch for multiplication and addition, you can switch the order and it doesn't matter.
The property.
There you go. Great. So a lot of these functions are going to be the same. So gets you the same result. Works out totally good. All right, cool. That is all the content that I have for today. Great job on the URL piece, putting it all together at the end. So the next couple weeks coming up next week is more advanced formulas. So specifically the formulas we'll get into next week. Our VLOOKUP and XLOOKUP are going to be one of our main topics. So those are going to be formulas that are commonly used to join multiple data sets together. So we'll use those formulas in combination with a bunch of the formulas that we covered today. So you can get deeper. We'll talk more about stacking multiple formulas together. And we'll do a couple of examples, maybe some like financial formulas or some statistics formulas, depending on what people are interested in. We'll get a little bit more advanced on formulas next week. And then for the week after that, I think is the holiday, it's President's Day. And then, so we'll skip that, but after that, we'll do charts and tables. So pivot tables, pivot charts, and pivot tables are a great one to be able to put on your resume. That's a common skill that people want to know, as is VLOOKUP and those kinds of formulas. So we'll talk about that, how to kind of do some data formatting, data summarizing, data visualizing. And then in the last week, we're going to put it all together into kind of like a dashboard project. To kind of test everything getting added together. And I shared these last week, but if you weren't here last week, these are some other spots that I would just recommend for general Excel learning, including a social media, Instagram, TikTok thing, if that's where you want to get your Excel content, which is actually pretty fun. Cool. All right, that's all I got. Any questions about this stuff we covered? Any general formula questions that we didn't cover? Anything else? Sounds good. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for making it out in the rain.